At exactly 8:47 a.m., I stood in the hallway watching Brett, my former intern, human golden retriever, and proud owner of a $300 haircut, high-five the CFO like he'd just discovered fire. That idiot once asked me if BCC stood for be cool, cool, and now he's strutting into the executive conference room like he owns the floor. I swear I could still smell the Axe body spray clinging to his Patagonia knockoff. If I'd had a blood pressure cuff, it would have burst into flames. 20 minutes from now, the CEO would blow sunshine up everyone's ass during the earnings call. The press would be listening. Clients, too. The whole company tuned in for our quarterly gospel of spin. And this time it was personal. Because rumor had it they were giving Brett, yes, the same Brett who once CC'd the janitor on a budget forecast, a bonus. Not a Starbucks gift card or a lukewarm Ataboy, but a full-blown six-figure bonus. I'd been in operations for 20 years. I'd overseen the MSA negotiations, drafted service tiers from scratch, managed escalations no one else would touch. And now I was apparently background noise to nepotism's golden child. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I did what I've always done, remembered the details they forgot. 3 days ago, I made a quiet call to the audit partner at Thorne and Holt, just to touch base about upcoming compliance reporting. That's what I told him. In reality, I flagged a small but lethal clause buried in the escrow instructions attached to our master services agreement with our biggest client. The clause I negotiated, the one I knew they hadn't read, the one that said if anyone touched escrow funds without client sign-off, especially for internal bonuses, it would trigger an automatic stop work order. Immediate, binding, irreversible. And I had receipts. Look, before we get too deep into the circus, let me just say, if you're enjoying this kind of story, hit the subscribe button and toss a like our way. 90% of folks listening don't subscribe, but that tiny click keeps this chaos train rolling, and it genuinely keeps the team motivated to keep digging up these jaw-dropping tales of corporate self-destruction. All right, back to the show. I took the stairs to the second floor, slowly, because I wanted to pass the green room where the execs were pre-gaming their delusions with coffee from the executive-only Keurig. There they were, the VP, his nephew Brett, and a few other loyal ladder climbers, all gathered around the CEO like a pack of frat brothers before a fantasy football draft. I didn't even get a nod as I passed, just silence, like I didn't exist, like the operations that made the earnings even possible had nothing to do with me. Fine, let them pretend I was invisible. That's when I'm at my most dangerous anyway. My office was smaller now, moved me after the last restructure, but it still had a door. I closed it and pulled the original printed MSA from my bag, heavy, triple-stapled, every page initialed. I kept it next to a flash drive labeled in case of emergency, break egos. That folder had every wire memo, every client-authorized draw, every clause they never bothered reading. I flipped to section 4.6 and smiled. It was still there. No bonus payouts from client escrow without formal written approval. Violation results in immediate suspension of services and default classification. Breach of contract, with all the bells and whistles. You'd think they'd remember that, especially since I wrote it. But Brett? Brett probably thought Escrow was a body lotion brand. 9:02 a.m. was coming fast. It'd start the call with their usual back patting. Then the big reveal. Brett's $200K strategic innovation bonus for what? Using ChatGPT to rewrite old pitch decks? Meanwhile, I'd be standing behind them with a flamethrower disguised as a three-ring binder. I smoothed my blazer, ran a finger over the edge of the folder, and took a breath. Let the children have their confetti. Mom brought fire. At 9:02 on the dot, the CEO leaned into the mic like he was about to announce the cure for cancer. His tie, blue silk, too tight, bulged against his neck like the truth trying to get out. He smiled that oily, PR-trained smile, glanced around the room for dramatic effect, and said before we get into the numbers, I'd like to recognize a rising star in our organization, Brett Lanning, our lead revenue strategist. Applause erupted. Fake, of course, the kind that starts with the boardroom suck-ups and trickles into the back rows out of obligation. I kept my hands folded in my lap. My stomach coiled, tight and bitter, but my face didn't twitch. The CEO continued, in just under 4 months, Brett's strategic modeling and cross-departmental insight have significantly shaped our revenue trajectory. That kind of impact deserves recognition, which is why we've awarded Brett a one-time bonus of. He paused for flair, like a magician about to reveal a dove up his ass, $200,000. There it was, like a slap with a velvet glove dipped in vinegar. No mention of the team that implemented those models. No nod to the 18-hour weeks operations pulled to keep the client's metrics from going off the rails. And definitely no thanks to the woman who built the infrastructure they just duct-taped Brett's name onto. I didn't blink. I didn't sigh. I adjusted my chair and glanced at the leather folder resting upright in my bag like a loaded gun at a wedding. 3 days ago, I'd spent an hour on the phone with David from Thorne and Holt. He's the kind of audit partner that still uses fountain pens and calls email electronic mail like it's 1998. He also doesn't speak unless it's legally necessary. But when I read him the clause, Section 4.6 of the MSA, Subpoint B. He'd gone quiet for a full 5 seconds. Then he cleared his throat and said, that would constitute a triggering event under the escrow protections. Have they formally notified the client? I told him they hadn't, because of course they hadn't. He exhaled sharply and said, I'll see you earnings day. I assume this will come up. I'd smiled. Oh, it will come up all right. Now, as the CEO basked in applause and Brett turned 4 shades of smug, David stood against the wall near the buffet table, casually thumbing through a binder that looked suspiciously like the one I gave him. I caught his eye. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Good. I returned my gaze to Brett. He was doing that awkward, humble brag face people do when they pretend to be surprised, but are clearly trying to angle their jawline for the camera. He stood, shook the CEO's hand, and gave a speech about modernizing revenue flows and challenging old paradigms. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. Last I checked, he thought Net 30 was a workout program. He ended his little monologue with a wink toward the boardroom. I imagined he thought it was charming. It was the kind of wink that made you want to check your wallet. Then he said, and I want to thank Olivia Grant, who mentored me when I first joined. I wouldn't be here without her. There it was, the final twist of the knife. The kind of public gratitude that made your skin crawl. He might as well have thanked the waitress who poured his mimosa. I nodded slightly, lips tight. Everyone in the room thought I was touched. They had no idea I was mentally cataloging every timestamp in the wire transfer schedule, the disbursement, the date of the bonus, the email the CFO sent authorizing the payment from the escrow account. Client funds meant strictly for services rendered, not for Brett's transformational insights. The printed MSA in my bag was thick, heavy, and notarized with a seal so deep it had left an imprint through 3 pages. I'd triple-checked every clause. I knew the consequences of a breach. I knew how quickly it would cascade, work orders paused, client relationships suspended, legal scrutiny within hours. And I knew none of them had the faintest clue what was about to happen. Not legal, not finance, not the CEO sipping his overcreamed coffee like he just won a Lifetime Achievement Award in bullshit. They'd set fire to the agreement I'd built, and they didn't even smell the smoke yet. But they would. Soon. Very, very soon. 2 weeks before the earnings call, I was in the copy room because my printer had mysteriously stopped working again, and I overheard 2 junior analysts from finance talking by the vending machine like gossiping teens outside a 7-Eleven. One of them, the one with the unfortunate mustache, whispered, yeah, they're pushing Brett's bonus early. Supposed to hit before earnings so it shows up on this quarter's morale sheet. My hand froze mid-staple. Early bonus for Brett? There hadn't been a single announcement from legal or ops. No memo, no requisition request, no routing form signed, just whispers. I walked calmly, methodically back to my desk and logged into the internal ledger system. Access was technically restricted, but 20 years of quietly cleaning up other people's messes had earned me a few permanent side doors. I ran a query on disbursements over the past month. Most of it was standard: software vendor payments, contractor invoices, end-of-quarter client settlements. Then I saw it. $200,000. Disbursed 2 days ago. The source? Line item, Client Escrow Pinnacle Systems account. I stared at the screen for a long, dangerous minute. My blood didn't boil, it cooled, like a diver slipping beneath freezing water and holding their breath. See, the thing about Client Escrow is this: it's sacred. That money doesn't belong to us. It's held for service fulfillment, used only for approved milestone payouts under strict terms, and I knew those terms better than anyone. I wrote them. I spent months negotiating them with Pinnacle's legal team. Clause 4.6, subsection B, any internal disbursement or incentive-based withdrawal from escrow, without written client authorization, shall trigger an automatic stop work order and classification of default under terms of service. It was clear as day, bolded, initialed, notarized, and now they'd torched it for a feel-good PR stunt. I clicked into the transaction metadata. The approval had come from Brett's uncle, the VP of Strategic Initiatives. Go figure. The timestamp lined up perfectly with the off-site team dinner they hosted at that overpriced Brazilian steakhouse last week. I remembered because I hadn't been invited. Again. I backed out of the ledger and opened the backup folder on my encrypted drive. I'd saved every version of the MSA, original drafts, red lines, final versions, all with their digital signatures. I knew what I was looking for before I even clicked. But still, I opened the PDF, scrolled to the clause, and there it was. 4.6b, unmistakable. I leaned back in my chair. The building felt different, like I'd just discovered we were sitting on a minefield no one else could see. That was the moment something in me shifted. For months, I'd swallowed every slight. Every cutback, every exclusion from meetings I used to run. Every time they ignored my emails but replied instantly to some idiot Slack message about breakfast burritos. I told myself to be patient. That competence would win eventually. But this wasn't incompetence anymore. It was malpractice. And worse, it was stupid. So I made 2 decisions that day. First, I printed out the full MSA again and had it notarized, this time at a third-party notary in the strip mall next to my dry cleaner. Just to be safe. Second, I called David the audit reaper. He answered on the second ring. Always did. Thorne and Holt, David speaking. Hi, David, I said, already feeling steadier, more grounded. I need you to do a dry run of the Pinnacle audit ahead of earnings. He paused. Are we expecting anything unusual? Not yet, I said, but we're about to be. I didn't say more. I didn't need to. David didn't ask questions unless they had boxes to tick. He just said, I'll be there, bring your documents. And that was it. I didn't rage. I didn't warn. I prepared, like I always do. Because they may have handed Brett a $200K check and a made-up title, but I was holding the pin to the grenade they just sat on. The morning after the wire memo confirmed the breach, I woke at 5:18 a.m. without an alarm. I stared at the ceiling in my one-bedroom apartment while the radiator clanged like a dying dishwasher and thought, they're not just reckless. They're lazy. Lazy enough to assume no one reads the fine print. That operations is just a pit stop between revenue dreams and stock options. That someone like me, quiet, methodical, and not invited to steak dinners, wouldn't notice $200,000 slipping out of escrow like a magician palming a coin. I put on the coffee, cracked my laptop, and opened the folder labeled Pinnacle MSA Final Truly Final PDF. My naming conventions aren't cute, they're efficient. The clause sat there like a sniper in plain sight. Section 4.6b, immediate stop work order upon unauthorized withdrawal from escrow. Signed, sealed, delivered, with notary stamps that looked like someone pressed a boot heel into the page. At 6:12 a.m., I called David. Thorne and Holt, this is David, he said, as punctual as a church bell. It's Olivia, I replied. Got a minute? Always, I explained the situation. He didn't interrupt, didn't gasp or chuckle like some legal show on cable. He just said, do you have proof the funds came from escrow? I do. Is the clause still active under the current MSA revision? Verified it myself, it's live. Another pause. I could practically hear him nodding. Then yes, it's enforceable. And if it wasn't client authorized, it's a breach. There it was, confirmed by someone who doesn't speak lightly. Will you be on site for earnings? I asked. I'm listed as observer, he said. But I can be more than that if need be more. That was all I needed to say. We didn't discuss intentions. David wasn't the type. I wasn't either. This wasn't a revenge plan. It was chain of custody. After hanging up, I moved quickly. No breakfast, just movement. I printed the full agreement twice, color copies, tabbed, initialed where required. One went into my handbag inside a hard-shell folder with corner locks. The other went into a fireproof document case under my desk, beside a printed packet of client emails confirming scope changes and billing authorizations. The digital versions were backed up in a zero-knowledge encrypted drive under a folder named Janitor Closet because no one ever opens that. I didn't email legal. I didn't trust them. Too many leaks. Too many accidental forwards to the VP's assistant. Too many excuses from a team that once called me overcautious for flagging a missing contract writer that would have cost us $1.8 million. No, this had to be airtight. Quiet. Clean. I even left out my usual legal pad during meetings, too many eyes on my notes lately. Instead, I tracked timelines in a disposable notebook I could shred the moment it was done. Brett was in the hallway that day, flirting with the HR rep while holding a cup of cold brew like it made him interesting. He nodded at me like we were buddies. I gave him a nod back. The same one I'd give a raccoon digging in my trash, restrained acknowledgement of a pest with no self-awareness. Big week, he said. You coming to the green room Friday? I'll be around, I said. He grinned. Cool. I'll save you a seat. Save me a seat? Darling, I'm setting the stage. By Thursday evening, I'd confirmed David's attendance. I looped in no one else. Not my team, not finance, not even my trusted assistant. The fewer people who knew, the less they could ruin. By Friday morning, everything was in motion. The CEO thought he was about to give Brett a standing ovation. I was about to hand the orchestra a different score entirely. One that ended with silence. They popped the champagne like they'd just cured world hunger with a spreadsheet. I watched from the hallway as the executive team gathered in the green room, our former break room, now repurposed with dim lighting and tufted faux leather chairs to feel more exclusive, like a cheap hotel trying too hard to impress a travel blogger. The CFO poured himself a second flute before his first one hit the halfway mark. The VP, Brett's uncle, was holding court near the whiteboard, babbling about new leadership pipelines and cross-functional brilliance. The only pipeline he ever maintained was the one funneling his relatives into jobs they couldn't spell. I didn't slow down, just kept walking, heels tapping against the laminate floor like a countdown clock. They didn't see me. They never did. A few steps from the door, Brett appeared out of nowhere, locking my path with that same smirking golden boy charm that made interns swoon and made anyone with a functioning prefrontal cortex want to throw him through a whiteboard. Hey, Olivia, he said, too loud, too chipper. Just wanted to say thanks. I mean, you really got me started in this business, you know? I looked at him, just for a moment. Enough to clock the champagne in his hand, the overpriced haircut sculpted to look effortless. The custom name tag someone had clearly rushed overnight. Brett Lanning, lead revenue strategist. Like the title had always belonged to him, like it hadn't been carved out of thin air by a committee of sycophants. I nodded once, not a smile, not a word, because if I opened my mouth I wasn't sure what would come out. He stood there, expecting a sentimental moment. Maybe a hug, or worse, a thank you. But I moved past him like a breeze through a drafty hallway. If he felt the chill, he didn't show it. Down the corridor near the conference room, David was already in position. You wouldn't have noticed him unless you were looking. That's his specialty, showing up without taking up space. He stood with one hand resting lightly on a leather-bound binder placed on the end table beside the projector console. It looked like a prop, just another corporate document lost in the shuffle. But I knew what was inside. The notarized MSA. Escrow instructions. Printouts of the disbursement logs. The clause 4.6b, highlighted and indexed. He caught my eye, no nod this time, just stillness. The kind of stillness that makes predators nervous. I walked past him and stepped into the conference room as the last echoes of the earnings call were fading from the speaker system. The CEO was doing his usual post-call routine, taking victory laps with department heads, accepting congratulations like he'd done anything other than greenlight nepotism with a ribbon on it. Behind me, someone popped another bottle. Laughter followed. I stood near the back of the room, saying nothing, watching, waiting. My folder stayed in my bag, didn't need to take it out, not yet. The real work was already done. This wasn't a war of volume, it was a war of paper, and my paper had signatures. I could feel it building, the shift. The moment before the room flips, when the temperature drops but no one knows why. It's not dramatic, it's chemical, a scent, a silence. The air had weight now and I was the only one who could feel it. One of the newer VPs, another LinkedIn peacock with buzzwords instead of instincts, walked past me holding a glass of Rosé like it was a baby bird. Hell of a quarter, he said. Brett really pulled us out of that Q2 slump. Did he? I said flatly. He nodded like he understood. He didn't. I checked the time. 10:06 a.m. David would wait until the internal debrief began, the closed-door executive recap where they reviewed the call, high-fived themselves again, and prepared talking points for press inquiries. That's when the binder would be opened, and that's when the grenade would go off. No alarms, no accusations, just the quiet violence of a clause being read aloud. They celebrated. I waited. My calm wasn't peace. It was the silence before the storm kicked in the windows. The debrief started exactly as expected, backslaps, buzzwords, and bad coffee. The CEO, puffed up and beaming, sat at the head of the conference table like a man who thought he just got away with a clean heist. His mug read "Make it happen," which felt ironic considering he hadn't made anything happen except a slow-motion train wreck with a smile on its face. VP Lanning sat on his right, adjusting his cufflinks like the cameras were still rolling. Brett was absent, likely still basking in the afterglow of unearned glory with some poor intern gassing him up in the green room. The rest of the execs filtered in, balancing scones and ego. David sat near the end of the table, quiet, his binder resting perfectly parallel to the edge of his notepad. He wasn't taking notes. He never does. The CEO tapped his phone and glanced at the door. Let's make this tight. Push out a PR summary by noon. Investors are gonna love Brett's story, young blood, future-facing, you know the drill. He chuckled. No one else did. The room quieted. David cleared his throat. I'd like to bring something to your attention, he said in that calm, matter-of-fact tone that always makes lawyers perk up like startled meerkats. It pertains to the disbursement authorized last week for Mr. Lanning's bonus. The CEO blinked. This is covered, David. HR and finance processed it. David didn't look up. He flipped open the binder and turned to a marked page, bright yellow tab section label, 4.6b. Then he read word for word. Per section 4.6 of the Master Services Agreement, any unapproved bonus disbursed from client escrow shall initiate immediate stop work and default termination of services, effective upon notification. The words dropped like a hammer wrapped in velvet. Could hear the HVAC unit humming. The fluorescent lights crackled above like popcorn left too long in the microwave. No one moved. The CFO's face drained faster than a bathtub. He fumbled for his laptop like it might start screaming if he didn't touch it fast enough. That hang on no, our draw was from the General Operations Fund, he stammered, clicking furiously. David didn't flinch. Wire memo identifies the source account as Pinnacle Escrow. It's dated, time-stamped, and lacks client sign-off. Another beat of silence. The CEO sat back. Wait, but that clause 4.6, it was revised, wasn't it? And that's when I finally spoke. That clause was added during the indemnity renegotiation last year, I said evenly. After the Q1 compliance audit flagged ambiguity in payment routing. You insisted we close the deal by Friday, so I drafted the language. Legal approved it. You signed it. The CEO turned to the CFO, who looked like he might vomit into his tablet. You didn't see that? The CFO's voice came out like wet paper. It wasn't flagged. We assumed David closed the binder. Per the clause, he said, you are now in material breach. A stop work notice will be sent to Pinnacle Systems within the hour. All project work must cease until formal client resolution. VP Lanning made a strange choking noise, half laugh, half panic. But this is just a clerical thing, right? We can reverse it, talk to them, no, I said flatly. This isn't clerical, it's contractual. And there it was, not a raised voice, not a slammed fist, just one sentence. Precise. Surgical. The entire room turned toward me like they were seeing me for the first time. Like I hadn't been there all along, cleaning up their messes, sealing their cracks, holding the walls together with spit and duct tape while they handed out glory to interns who still didn't know what a pivot table was. I stood, my bag already zipped. They'd finally heard me, because this time my words had teeth. It started with one word, legal. The CEO spat it out like it had betrayed him personally. Call legal. Now. Suddenly the room that had been a smug little echo chamber 5 minutes ago turned into a hornet's nest. Chairs scraped. Phones came out. People who were just praising Brett's strategic brilliance were now white-knuckling their devices, whispering with forced calm. The CFO was sweating through his collar. His laptop screen showed a frantic scroll of the ledger system, page after page of transactions he should have flagged but didn't. VP Lanning? Ghost white. Like he'd just realized the bonus he authorized was also the grenade he personally pulled the pin from. Meanwhile, David packed his binder with the casual precision of a man folding a flag at a funeral. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. Where's Olivia? The CEO asked sharply, eyes scanning the room like I was a flight risk instead of the only adult in the building. Someone pointed toward the door. I was already halfway through it. Olivia barked, the chief of staff, new hire, still shiny. Can you stay back a moment? We need to clarify. No, I said, not even slowing. I've said everything that needed saying. They tried again, just a quick I didn't stop. Behind me, I heard the CEO hiss through clenched teeth. Who signed off on this? Who let this go through? Buddy checked the mirror. The clatter behind me escalated, voices overlapping. Legal had arrived late, as always, scrambling for context. Someone spilled coffee. The printer jammed. It felt like watching the tail end of a magic trick unravel, wires showing, mirrors cracking, illusion dissolving into raw panic. I didn't smirk. I didn't even glance over my shoulder. By the time I reached the stairwell, my phone buzzed. Not a message, not a call, an alert. Internal system update. User badge access revoked. Lanning, Brett. Timestamp, 11:07 a.m. Brett had been pulled into a side conference room. HR was likely using the "we're very disappointed" voice while handing him a packet and a cardboard box. I pictured him sitting there, blinking like a Labrador that just heard thunder for the first time. Still not understanding how the party ended so quickly. Still thinking maybe this was all a misunderstanding. That Uncle VP would fix it. Spoiler alert, he wouldn't. Because Uncle VP was now neck-deep in audit flags, redlined MSA printouts, and a rising tide of investor questions about why a bonus was paid out of client funds without any oversight. And the client? Oh, be notified within the hour. By David, by the book, with a tone that made it very clear this was not an administrative hiccup, this was breach. As I stepped outside into the brittle autumn air, I felt something strange. Not triumph, not revenge, just clarity. Like I'd been holding my breath for years without realizing it, and now the oxygen was sharp in my lungs again. The building loomed behind me, glass panels reflecting a storm no one saw coming. It tried to make me invisible, forgettable. They forgot the one rule that mattered. I built the system they just broke. By 2:11 p.m., the email landed in my inbox like a feather coated in lead. Subject line, request for transition oversight Pinnacle Systems. No pleasantries, no awkward formalities. Just, given the nature of the breach, we'll need someone to manage the wind down and ensure service continuity under interim compliance. Are you available? I stared at the screen, half expecting it to disappear. It didn't. It wasn't just an offer, it was a choice. For once, I had the leverage. I read it again, slower this time, savoring every syllable. Pinnacle, the client I'd spent years building brick by brick, site visit by site visit, midnight compliance rewrites, and early morning disaster recoveries, wasn't reaching out to the CEO, or the VP, or some faceless liaison from legal. They were reaching out to me. Because when the smoke clears, you don't call the clowns who set the fire. You call the one who knows where the exits are. I hit reply. Happy to support. I'm available. As an independent. Simple, precise. No exclamation marks, just facts. 10 minutes later, their general counsel responded with a draft engagement letter. My rate doubled. Scope, 90-day handoff, full transition autonomy, direct access to executive stakeholders. No middlemen, no Lanning. No Brett. Speaking of Brett, word had already started to leak. First, it was the Slack deactivation. Then his access badge. Then someone in marketing forwarded me a screenshot. Brett's LinkedIn profile gone. No deactivation notice, no clever pivot post, just vanished, like a ghost. One day lead revenue strategist, the next digital tumbleweed. VP Lanning went on leave by 4 p.m. That's how they framed it internally. An email from HR, full of vague wellness language and appreciation for his many contributions. But I'd seen the legal intake logs. He'd already consulted an attorney, probably trying to figure out how to explain away a signature on a $200K disbursement from the one account labeled "Do Not Touch Without Client Permission" in bold, underlined caps. Finance was in shambles. Legal was on triage. PR hadn't released a single statement since the earnings call because there was nothing to say that wouldn't pour gasoline on the smoldering crater. Meanwhile, I was home, not celebrating, not gloating, just sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee that hadn't gone cold for once. My laptop open to the draft engagement letter. my printer humming with the click of contracts being born. This wasn't a Hollywood ending. No music swelled. No one stood up and applauded as I walked out. But my phone did buzz with a message from a former project manager. You were the only one who ever knew what the hell was going on. I should have said that before. I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because that was the point, wasn't it? I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to threaten. I didn't even need to raise my voice. I wrote the clause. I followed the paper. I kept the receipts. When it all collapsed under the weight of their shortcuts and arrogance, I didn't have to knock down a single wall. They tore the house down themselves. All I had to do was hold the deed. The office wasn't fancy. No private elevator, no espresso bar disguised as a collaboration zone. Just a clean, glass-walled meeting room in a downtown legal suite with a decent view of a parking garage and a ficus plant that hadn't been watered to death. But it was quiet. Intentional. When the general counsel for Pinnacle Systems extended her hand across the table, her expression didn't say favor. It said partnership. We'd like to offer you the operations lead for the new RFP, she said. Full autonomy, direct reporting line. Scorched earth optional. Her tone was dry, but the meaning was clear. They were cleaning house. And they wanted someone who'd already proven they didn't play nice with people who colored outside the lines, especially when those lines were contracts, drawn in ink and signed in boardrooms. I took a breath, then I nodded. I accept, I said. On one condition, no one who touched the last engagement touches this one. Not even to photocopy, she grinned. Consider it handled. We shook hands. On the way out, I passed David from Thorne and Holt in the lobby, stepping into the elevator with his briefcase and the same unreadable expression he always wore. He nodded once, slid a slim envelope into the receptionist's tray, and disappeared behind the closing doors. I didn't have to open it. I knew what was inside. By the time I got back to my apartment, the memo had been published internally. To all executives from Thorne and Holt LLP subject. Escrow clause breach MSA compliance findings 1 paragraph, 1 citation, 1 undeniable line. Section 4.6b of the executed MSA was triggered by the unauthorized disbursement. The breach constitutes material default. Per agreement terms, all operations must remain frozen until further client authorization. No room for spin, no wiggle language, just stone-carved finality. I watched as my phone buzzed with fallout. Former coworkers pinging to check in, masked panic behind feigned curiosity. Recruiter or two sniffing around. A DM from someone in legal that just said, holy hell, then it came. A number I hadn't seen since the quarterly reviews when they still pretended I mattered. The CEO, text only. Why didn't you warn us? No greeting, no punctuation, just that. I stared at it for a moment, then typed. I wrote the rules. You chose to ignore the author. Sent. No read receipt, just silence. Perfect. I closed my laptop. New contract was already signed, scanned, and returned. My rate had gone up. My authority was now baked into the clause structure. I wasn't back in the game, I was the game. Monday morning, I walked into my new office. Smaller, yes, but it was mine. The desk still smelled like laminate, the walls were bare, the inbox was clean. But the lock clicked behind me with the softest, most satisfying finality I've ever heard. Not applause, not confetti. Just that one sound. My door locking from the inside. Because this time, I wasn't asking for a seat at their table. I'd built my own. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.